Chancellor, we come to the conferment of our second honorary graduate. Chancellor, ladies and gentlemen, Roger Harrabin is the BBC's environment analyst and a world-leading broadcaster credited internationally for his agenda-setting journalism on environmental and global social issues. His skill is to foresee complex issues and then bring them to life for the layperson to understand, critically without dumbing down issues or losing the richness of the debates around them. A sharp-witted, highly influential figure in the global media, Roger has won numerous awards for his journalism on sustainable development, infused with a respect for the evidence and with an eye to the long term, on issues such as water, food, health, energy, and climate. His approach is light touch and unswervingly rigorous, and it has been so for over a quarter of a century. Roger joins us at Cranfield today with his wife Anne and Roger's mother Sylvia, to whom we extend the warmest of welcomes. Roger was raised in Coventry, where his father ran a building firm. He studied English at St Catherine's, Cambridge, where he started a college newspaper and was also president of the Junior Common Room. He then began a career on the Coventry Evening Telegraph, building a reputation for bringing fresh topics to the news, a signature style that remains his hallmark today. He quickly won a British Press Award in 1980 for his features tracing the roots of Coventry Asians back to Pakistan and India. Roger then joined Thames TV as a producer, whilst freelancing as a sports sub-editor in Fleet Street, on the News of the World and the Sunday Mirror. Roger's next break was at the BBC's World at One, where he secured a succession of awards for high-caliber reporting on issues such as how trade rules affect sugar workers in Guyana and on development dilemmas in Africa. His insights and his frank style have been in demand ever since, for Panorama, Newsnight, Assignment, the 10 o'clock news, BBC World, and the World at One. Through these, and influential contributions to Radio 4's Today programme, environment and equity issues have become familiar in the public consciousness. Climate change, biodiversity, carbon footprints, green taxation, third world debt, and many more. Issues in which Roger has become an authority and a highly trusted voice. Inevitably, with this reach of topics, Roger has travelled extensively and secured acclaimed interviews with the likes of Ban Ki-moon, former EU President Barroso, Tony Blair, John Kerry, and Al Gore. As you might imagine, he is a substantive contributor to science policy debates, taking sabbaticals at Green College, Oxford, and Wolfson College, Cambridge, where he is an Associate Press Fellow. Given Roger's influence, it was no surprise that in 2004, the BBC created the role of environmental analyst for Roger, so he could work across its entire media. The title rather understates its significance, as it positions Roger as the leading voice across the global BBC network on green issues affecting the world's economies. With typical foresight and clarity, he produced reports for Newsnight on uncertainty and climate forecasting and on geoengineering to combat climate change, well before these became issues of note. He won the Media Natura Award for TV documentaries for Gas Muzzlers, a film on green energy investment in America. In 2007, he shared the Media Natura TV News Award for films on the 10 o'clock news. One, from Bangladesh, highlighted the need for climate adaptation, again a topic aired little at the time on primetime news. Another popularised embedded emissions, the carbon, water and nitrogen tied up within value chains, and highlighted the problems in all the methodologies comparing international greenhouse gas emissions. Then, in 2010, came Roger's Uncertain Climate, a highly praised Radio 4 documentary examining media depictions of climate change, and a further feature outlining the difficulties of the UN Climate Change Conference in Copenhagen. Around this time, Roger also founded BBC Radio 4's magazine programme, Costing the Earth, bringing a lighter touch to environmental issues, on which many Cranfield staff have featured, I'm delighted to add. Much of Roger's reporting concerns risk issues. He believed these consistently fail to fit conventional news criteria of novelty, drama, conflict, personality, and pictures. This results in the media assigning a misplaced prominence to certain issues whilst ignoring strategic long-term risks like preventative health, the security of water, food, energy, and the climate. In response, Roger has made these issues his domain and created high-quality programmes and features to communicate the richness of these debates to the general public. Chancellor, ladies and gentlemen, I could go on, but you now have a strong sense of Roger's commitment to the responsible reporting of the key issues of our time. He is our leading environmental broadcaster and the essential voice of reason. A Roger Harrabin item is one to be attentive to be entertained by, and is one that will leave you thinking afresh about an issue you previously thought was cut and dried. Roger, we truly admire your flair in communicating the issues we research and teach at Cranfield in a way that absorbs ordinary people. We in the assembled audience today will recognise this as a rare talent, pivotal in any functioning democracy. And so, Chancellor, I'm authorised by the Council and by the Senate to ask you to confer on Roger Harrabin the degree of Doctor of Science honoris causa.
I'm delighted to admit you to the degree of Doctor of Science honoris causa.
Chancellor, Vice-Chancellor, faculty, family and friends, graduates, hello. I know that this funny thing is moving in front of my face. It's supposed to be on the left-hand side, so excuse me for a moment while I just have a minor readjustment. It's terribly difficult, this kit, isn't it? You have an extremely distinguished Vice-Chancellor. I don't know if you know this. I think when I was at university, I didn't realise the level of distinction held by those people who taught me and ran my institutions. Barbara Young, your Vice-Chancellor, your Chancellor, sorry, he has been an absolutely extraordinary force in the environment movement in the UK and globally for decades. She has taken on many roles, each one of them bringing an enormous amount of energy and conviction and personal persuasiveness, and has shifted policy in many areas. I don't know if you know what a treasure she is, but I hope you get a bit of an idea of that now. She rang me out of the blue when I was lying in bed. I'm not sure why I was lying in bed, it's probably a good reason, and said, Roger, would you accept an honorary degree from us? Well, I was absolutely flabbergasted. Nobody's offered me an honorary degree before, unlike Barbara, who has 76,000, and Christiana, who's on now her fourth. This is my first, so it was a bit of a surprise. And I said, do I have to wear a gown? And she said, yes. And I said, what colour? And she said, pink. So I paused for a moment and I said, look, Barbara, I'm really sorry. I don't think I can accept. I really don't look good in pink. So there was a bit of a pause when she was wondering whether I meant it or not. And I only found out today, and Barbara, I won't give away the whole of this story, don't worry. I only found out today why she was so worried, because previously you had a very high-profile guest who apparently refused to wear the gown to which that person, and I won't say what gender, was assigned. So that caused Barbara a little concern. Anyway, I want to say what an extraordinary honour it is to receive this honorary doctorate from an organisation like yours. You are on the cutting edge and have been for many years in many of the technologies in which I'm interested, and many of the technologies that are going to hopefully help us out of this mess we're in on the planet. Only today, David Haneke is being awarded the prize for the top PhD. His PhD could prove absolutely massively influential in terms of carbon capture and storage if it can be brought up to scale, because he has found a way, he thinks, of vastly reducing the cost of carbon capture and storage. And that would be massive for the world. That's happening right here amongst your own peers in your own organization. That could be a real world-changing discovery that you have there. I want to share this honor with my producers. I've worked with many wonderful people over the years, and particularly with my editors, who have given me an extraordinary amount of freedom. When I was taken onto the Today program by Roger Mosey, he said he'd been asking me to join for several years, and eventually he said, look, if you join, I will exempt you from day shifts and night shifts and let you do any story you want anywhere in the world as often as you want. Now will you join my program? And what I should have said is how much, because if you're ever in that situation, guys, just think about it for a minute, because there's a pay rise on the way if you just remember to ask. But I said yes without asking for the pay rise. But it's proved a marvelous opportunity for me and enabled me to break ground in the way that I'm proud to have done. But I wouldn't have been able to do that if I hadn't had the most enormous backing from producers and editors. And often my editors have said to me, Roger, are you sure you want to do that? And I've said yes, and they've said off you go. And that has been absolutely fantastic. I'm particularly honored to be here with Christiana Figueres. I don't know if you have noticed already, but this is not a normal person. This is a force of nature. That woman has the capacity, and I've seen many times her to bring in a whole hall of hardened diplomats to tears. She can turn on the passion and the emotion and the factual backup. You got some glimpse of that. She was right at the heart of that amazing meeting in Paris, which none of us thought would produce the results that it did. I mean, nobody expected that. And in the end, Christiana and others were crying and jumping up and down, and everyone was cheering. Of course, things have been undermined a little by that man across the other side of the large pool of water, but we shall see how that plays out. I suspect for the time being, things might not be too bad, but we shall wait and see. I want to offer you a few thoughts now, more practical thoughts, not big picture thoughts like Christiana's, but smaller thoughts about how you could go about your work in becoming the sort of leaders that this institution wants you to be. And one of them is, you're all in sciences, one of my big problems with science and talking to scientists often is that they think in silos. They have their piece of research, which may be perfectly good, but that piece of research will ignore other pieces of research sitting here, 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 and here, which together make up a much broader landscape, and which may or may not have an influence on that particular piece of research on which they are working. I'm going to just give you a few examples. One is there was a paper recently that received massive publicity saying that clean cook stoves, and that's cook stoves that use wood but much less wood and they're much better engineered, clean cook stoves did not prevent in any way childhood pneumonia. This went round the world, and I've spoken since to those people who are involved in promoting clean cook stoves, and it has caused them huge problems. Now, the piece of research was not inaccurate. What it ignored was the fact that clean cook stoves do loads of things. They use half of the amount of wood, which means women have to spend, and they are always women have to spend half as much time searching for wood as they otherwise would have done. It means half the assault on the natural environment with all those trees and bushes cut down. It means a tiny fraction of the amount of smoke, the sort of smoke that blinds young children and gives them persistent coughs and mothers. If any of you have crouched down next to a cook stove in Africa with a woman preparing the evening meal, it is absolutely unbearable to sit anywhere near where she's sitting because of the smoke in your face. Clean cook stoves help all of those things. But this one paper, because it was reported very narrowly, gave the impression that actually they weren't doing the job they were supposed to do. Another thought is on biofuel. So when scientists started to produce results on biofuel, projections on biofuel a few years ago, they were saying, oh, well, look, we've got all this land in Europe, for forests. If we turn that to biofuel, we'll have X amount of biofuel and that'll be fantastic. That research was typically ignoring other research in which people were saying, well, we've got this land and we can use it for biomass. And there was other research saying, oh, we can use it for fibres. And other research saying, oh, we can use this land for timber. By the time we'd finished, all these different researchers, all producing perfectly good research in their own right, had quadruply or quintuply counted the amount of forest there is available in Europe, because they didn't lift up their eyes from their narrow paper and look to see what else was out there in the landscape. My third example is cultured meat. I was at the Glastonbury Festival last weekend. I'm still proudly wearing my wristband. I can't bear to cut it off. And I met a young woman who'd been doing a PhD into cultured meat. And she pulled out of it because she said the people who were working with her were so enthusiastic about cultured meat that they weren't taking into account that the cultured meat itself needed to be fed with soya, which would in turn still react with the destruction of rainforests all around the world. So I would urge you, as my first thought, to keep a big picture on what you're doing. Keep talking to people in related fields so your narrow work can take a broad perspective. My second thought to you is on communication. Scientists often don't communicate very well. Often they are nervous about communicating because they feel their peers will say, oh, you oversimplified that. Well, let me tell you, we all oversimplify stuff all the time. Every report I do is oversimplified. I wince at my own words because I know much more lies behind them. But I do the best I can to communicate in a simple way that people will understand. And if they get 73% of it and the rest is a bit misleading, well, I think that's probably not a bad score. And I would advise you guys to do the same. If you're asked to communicate, find a way of communicating that gives people most of the truth, rather than saying, oh no, I can't communicate this, it's too complicated, I'm not going to give people any of the truth, because 73% of the truth is better than 0% of the truth. When you communicate with a passion. You will all have passion about your subjects. When I'm talking about communication here, I don't mean talking just to the mainstream media, although that is useful. You're all on social media. Use social media to talk about your passions. You go to the pub with your friends. Talk to your friends about your passions. Let your passion flow from your work into your social life, and don't let there be a strong boundary between the two, so your work becomes your social life. And particularly through social media. So communicate with the passion. And if people are struggling to pick up your words, think of a different way of framing it. So I gave an example this morning. I was giving a talk at Leicester this morning about the framing of something that happened this week. The Committee on Climate Change came up with a report saying the government needs to urgently bring forward new policies, otherwise the existing policies on climate change, which have brought down emissions and also brought down bills through energy efficiency, will be blown away by people wanting more and more gadgets. So that was the story that I wrote. And then I got a phone call late at night from the night editor saying, I know this. Every year or every week there's somebody saying government targets are not enough. You know, I don't want this story, I'm going to drop it. So I just sort of scrambled about in my mind for, how else could I tell the story? And there was another way of telling the story, which was that most people don't know that energy bills have gone down over the past, since 2008, energy bills have been forced down by energy efficiency standards. So I said, oh yeah, this is the way of telling the story. And she said, oh, that's interesting. I'll take that. So when you're thinking of framing your stories, if you find you're bouncing off people, try and find a way in which you can make your messages relevant to them and take that away with you. And then just a final thought, really. I'm going to suppose that most of you think that what you're doing is good for the world. If you think that, then make sure you communicate it. And like Christiana Figueres, dream a dream and never, ever give up. Thank you.